We've got dudes talking to me about um, Orion Greys or something like that. People just asking me about um, why it is that my idea about Orions and the Orions that I'm talking about and am in contact with aren't the aren't matching up with the kinds of beings and their constitutions and behaviors and backstories and histories and whatnot for lots of other people claiming to be experiencers. The answer to that is that the others are all full of shit. Um, that's the short answer, but the longer answer is I think like there's this idea, and there's a few people have been looking into because of this. I've been investigating the false experiences, which is an interesting and amusing pastime of mine just recently. Um, so we say that I'm not going to mention any names, but these kinds of sort of new age hippy dippy dudes that are just all about the reptilians and the Palladians and the fucking evil Orion Greys and all this kind of stuff. It's all just bullshit. Now, what they do is they take little bits and pieces from bits of evidence that are available there that are reflecting the genuine paradigm, and they run off with them. So you get legitimate experiences. People, contactees, abductees, experiencers that say that they see beings that are insect-like. Others say they see beings that are reptilian-like, reptile-like, with scales, claws, etc. Others that see tall beings with fair hair and blue eyes, things like that. So you've got these kinds of stereotypical. They've come to be sort of archetypal. Well, they're not truly archetypal in the old Jungian sense, of course, but they are sort of like stock standard characters now in ufology. People talking about, and they've divided them up and they've decided that there must be reptilian-like beings, there must be mantis-like beings, there must be Nordic-like beings, and they are separate races, etc., and so on. Now, David Jacobs, I don't. That dude's way off in lots of different respects, but he also has some things to say in his books that are spot on. So I agree with David Jacobs here and there, and I disagree with him in a lot of ways with what he did with his hypnotic regression in his nonsense. And of course, David Jacobs is being cancelled and whatnot nowadays. What I have to say to that is, ew, David. But what he had to say about in one of his books in the I can't think of the name of it right now. The Threat. I think that was his seminal book. That's probably not appropriate to use that word when we're talking about David Jacobs, but it brings things to mind. But he said that people that he was hypnotizing and regressing would talk about beings that they considered to be reptilian or insectoid or like greys in virtually the same terms. Now I'm paraphrasing him here, but he said something like that. So, this is different ways of interpreting the same kinds of phenomena and empirical evidence. Some people will take Dan Crane himself, Dan Burish, that worked at S4, microbiologist at S4 that worked with a P-52 Orion, future human, a P-52 J-Rod, sorry, future human. Um, Kind of like a grey but dark brown in colour, oily skin, scaly, dark claws, um, long claws. Now, he said when he first saw Kayala, he said he thought it was a monkey in the corner. And then he thought it looked kind of like an insect. Maybe it was insect-like. So these sort of thoughts are rushing through his mind as he's interacting with an ET or CT or future human or whatever you want to call them for the first time. Yeah, you get that. So people that are having genuine experiences with beings are having these desperately seeking in their minds to associate what they're seeing with something that they know well. And is it in this is insect-like, and they'll say that in their aggression or in their recount of what's happened to them, or they'll say monkey-like, or they'll say reptile-like. Well, P-52 J-rods also have scaly skin, claws, blah blah blah. And then what you have is the bullshit artists and the myth makers and the fantasists latching on to these elements and running off with them like a jackal ripping piece off the carcass and pissing off with it. They'll get it somewhere and they'll start their own little narrative. That there are reptilian beings that are a race and they're from a certain place and they have these histories, and the mythology and the folklore, or the internet lore begins as humans, as natural storytelling animals. They just fucking love this shit. They just can't get enough of it. They just pump this out, especially if there's doubt. You fill it. You fill it with nonsense. Insect-like. Oh, we've got another race. Some of them said they were insect-like. Same beings, but some interpreted insect-like. Boom. Other races, there must be insect-like beings. So what you have is the nomenclature of ufology is all fucked up. Spread over the just four beings that we've been interacting with for the past few thousand years. All now with these names, these categories that don't really match up with anything. What you get then as well is if you have people imbibing this shit, so that there are people that are believing all this stuff about reptilian beings from Draco that's absolutely crap. People have just been making up stories, copying off each other, building on as all mythology builds. Palladian beings are reserved, this finger in particular, for that. Tall, fair Scandinavian supermodels or porn stars. Mantis-like beings, like all of this shit, all emerges and builds from just interpretations of four races that are actually human, or human lineage, post-human beings. And they don't necessarily sit that well either across these terms, like across the actual four races that exist. These sort of false, faux taxonomies, people try to slip onto them. P24s, like the Steve Boucher beings, people call them greys. Well, they're sort of pale looking greyish sort of dudes with huge noggins, kind of like Megamind. People call them grey sometimes. Then you have P45s that are the same race 20 odd thousand years ahead that have, like the P24s have scaly skin and claws, but the P45s that come 20,000 years later, more prominent scales, even larger claws, a bit of a shrunken head from what it was before, even though it's still larger than ours relative to our body size. Um, and then they have the big black eyes rather than eyes with white still showing, like the P24s. P52s, the same race 7,000 years further on, similar looking but dark brown color now. And then the separate race distinctive because they left the Earth at a different time. Check out the Dan Burish testimony, Dan Crane. The Orions, the tall whites, sometimes they're called Nordics. Sometimes they're called tall greys. So the term grey can be for P24s, P45s. Sometimes maybe when people say P52s, they say greys, even though they're brown. Tall whites or Majeena or P52 Orions. They are in the crabwood crop circle. Okay, they are represented in the crabwood crop circle because that's a grey in the crabwood crop circle. So here we are coming to perhaps the origins of the greys from Orion stream or thread through internet folklore. Um, so the greys from Orion. So the crabwood crop circle. From 2002 shows a being. The being is one of these. These beings are Majeena or P52 Orions. Once upon a time, they were called Nordics a lot before Charles Hall's books were published in the early 2000s, in 2002, and people started saying tall whites and things like that. Why were they called Nordics? Because they had fair hair and big blue eyes and were tall and thin and things like that. It was just a way of just a slang kind of way for people in the know to talk about them, which spread out into the community. And then when Charles Hall's books came out, two separate terms. Of course, what you get people doing is trying to add complexity where there isn't, and suggesting that that is two different kinds of beings. Now, the crabwood crop circle is, of course, very similar to this image. Which is the Christopher Bledsoe Sr. inspired drawing that was done by a sketch artist for him. Same beings again. The same beings Charles Hall met, that he called tall whites. They're P52 Orions. They're these dudes, Crabble Crop Circle. His photos of them, again, genuine photos. I'm very certain of them. And here's sketches I've done of them that I've been doing for a bit now. Evil greys from Orion. There are no greys from Orion. Well, it depends on what you mean by greys. So we're saying maybe tall whites could be called tall greys. Charles Hall himself mistook tall whites in boa suits for another race and called them tall greys, still tall whites. Evil greys from Orion. Well, they're the Majeena, they're the tall whites. So you're saying they're evil? Well, they're less evil than Homo sapiens. If you, it depends on what you define by evil, but they're more compassionate, empathetic, and understanding than Homo sapiens for the most part. If we're going to be essentialist about them and about us, say for the most part, they are less evil than Homo sapiens on the whole. So you're going to call them evil. Basically, the people that talk about reptilians, Orion Greys, blue avians, uh, Palladian, tall Palladian, Billy Meyer type beings. Oh, I wasn't going to mention any names. Um, all of that's bullshit. So that's just the circus that hangs on the outside of it. Some of these people are delusional, but most of them aren't. And I've been watching people recently and really checking out some of their interviews and some of the videos they make. They're not delusional, they're lying. I can just tell by the way, I don't really fucking know how the hell I'm doing it. I can tell that they're lying. I can sense it. I can sense that fucking narcissistic shit. Anyway, it's a pet hate of mine. Narcissists, pathological liars. I get really fucking. I have a I have a real problem with cultural. I have a real problem with cultures. I want to smash the shit out of the fucking. I have a real problem with cultural truths, with conventional truths. I want absolute truth. I have a problem in the sense that I want to know whether there is water on the other side of the hill. I want to know whether it's there or not. I don't want to take someone's word for it that sounds like they talk a good game, that is confident and is telling me, no, the water isn't behind the hill, because they've already looked and they're quite certain. And if you come around over to their side of the house, they'll give you a little bit of water for a couple of bucks. I'm like, no, fuck that shit. Step aside. I'm checking out behind the hill. Right? These dudes are charlatans, tricksters, hoaxers, narcissists, pathological liars. Narcissists, of course, are very weak at their core and require acceptance from others around them. I mean, everyone does to a certain extent, but narcissists in particular are weak at the core. I mean, people most likely watching this will understand. Narcissists require acceptance from those around them and being put up on a pedestal, and others to pump up their tires constantly because they actually have a low sense of themselves, a low self-esteem. Contrary to the way they seem, they're often larger than life people. They're often bragging, boasting, talking about what they've done, what this, that, making shit up, blah, blah, blah. All because they don't believe that anyone would accept them for themselves because they actually have a low self-esteem. So they will never let anyone see themselves because they actually believe themselves to be inferior, weak, undeserving, etc. and so on. So ufology is full of them and full of it. And It shits me. Now, yeah, so I've been watching them lately, which I thought would be painful, but I'm actually, unfortunately, finding it quite amusing. And I think that maybe is saying something not too positive about my own character. But I'm like, oh no, no, stop it. Yes, say it, say it. No, no, don't say that. Like, um, go on, tell me more. Tell me more of this bullshit. As they work off each other as well. It's a racket. It's a good game. They're making money out of it. It's something that's been going on in the world of spirituality and religion for a long, long time. These sort of false gurus and just ah. So I'm torn between finding them highly amusing and finding it all completely depressing because there's so many people that are prepared to take on this kind of shit. Most people that are just reasonable, ordinary people um, just presume if someone sounds like they know what they're talking about, they do. And so they go under with this crap. Um, but anyway, okay, cool. So that'll do, I suppose. What have we got? We've got 20 minutes or so. Yeah, was there anything? Oh, what? So, yeah, so crop circle, yeah. Cool. Okay. Until next time, dudes. Catch us later. Slanakov. Modern Tango.